Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. The door of the Bentley swung open in the middle of a London downpour. A drenched woman stumbled inside, breathing hard, clutching a baby wrapped in a blanket. Please, may I hide in your car? Her voice broke, trembling, as if the rain itself were forcing the words from her. Dominic Russo froze. The hand that had made countless men tremble instantly moved toward the gun holstered beneath his jacket. But then the dim light hit the glass, and he saw what his pulse had already sensed. A child. The small blanket was soaked through, a flushed little face, tiny fingers gripping her mother's coat. Outside, the rain lashed the street like whips. Thunder cracked in the distance, and flashes of light melted into streaks of gold across the windshield. The woman was almost pleading. Just a minute. Please, he's coming. Dominic didn't ask who he was. He simply glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a figure moving between parked cars. Tall, angry, a hunter. He pressed the lock button. Lock the doors, he said, his voice low, steady, cold. The woman obeyed, shaking all over. The baby whimpered, her cries thin as a thread cutting through the suffocating silence. Dominic said nothing. He only watched through the mirror. The man outside stopped in front of the car, squinting to peer in. 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then came a string of curses, shouted into the rain, before the figure turned and vanished into the night. Inside the car, there was no space for sound. Only the woman's ragged breathing, the smell of rain, and the fragile warmth of the baby. She collapsed against the seat, rainwater dripping onto the floor in small, glistening pools. Thank you. I didn't know where else to go, she rasped, her lips pale from the cold. Dominic still didn't speak. He just looked, his eyes sharp, distant, yet deep enough to make her turn away. A drop of water slid from her hair onto his hand, hot against his skin. Who was that man? Dominic finally asked. My ex, she whispered. The father of my child. She held the baby closer. He found us tonight. I had to run. Her voice was hollow, heavy with a fear long carved into her bones. Not the fear of being beaten, but of being caught. Dominic leaned slightly to open the compartment behind him and pulled out a large gray towel. Wrap her in this, he said, tossing it toward her. She caught it, her trembling fingers brushing his hand. Just a fleeting touch, yet enough to send a sharp current through his body. I'm Sophia, she murmured, still avoiding his gaze. And this is Emma. Dominic, he replied. A faint, exhausted smile crossed her lips. Thank you, Dominic. He didn't answer, just stared out the window, at the endless rain streaking silver over glass. Beyond, London glowed under red traffic lights, the color bleeding like smoke into the wet night. He knew what he should say. Get out. He knew he should call the police. Close his world again. But he didn't. Instead, he asked quietly, Do you have anywhere to go? She shook her head. No, just away from him. Dominic looked down at the baby, small, sleeping, untouched by the storm outside. Something unfamiliar stirred in his chest, a softness he thought he'd buried years ago. She whispered, He always finds us. He won't stop. Dominic started the engine. Headlights cut through the curtain of rain, the white light sliding over his face, half illuminated, half lost in shadow. Not tonight, he said. She turned to him, startled. What are you doing? Taking you somewhere safe. Why? She asked, voice trembling. You don't even know me. Dominic met her eyes. Because I know what it feels like to be hunted. The Bentley surged forward into the night, gliding through streets shimmering with gold reflections, carrying 3 strangers bound by chance, a Mafia man, a young mother, and a child. Outside, London stayed the same, wet, cold, beautiful, and distant. Inside, Dominic Russo, the man the city feared, felt a strange warmth stir in his chest, all because of a child who fit perfectly within her mother's arms. He didn't know why he stopped, didn't know why he let them into his car or into his life. He only knew that the moment she said, Please, may I hide in your car? Everything he'd ever believed about power, darkness, and control shifted. And outside, the London rain kept falling as if the sky itself was witnessing the first quiet tremor of a soul beginning to change. The road leading out of central London was deserted, lit only by streaks of sodium light rippling across puddles. The black Bentley glided through the rain like a ghost, its tires slicing water into fine, shimmering trails. Inside, no one spoke. Sophia held Emma tightly against her chest, her back pressed to the seat, eyes still wide open. The steady beat of the rain sounded like her own quickened heartbeat, while Dominic stared straight ahead, hands firm on the steering wheel. Light flickered across his face in intervals, shards of brightness and shadow carving across his calm, deep eyes. When the car turned onto a cobblestone road, Sophia shivered. The scene outside was unnervingly still. No restaurants, no neon signs, just rows of rain-soaked trees and darkness thick as velvet. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "Somewhere he'll never find you," Dominic replied without looking at her. Through the curtain of rain emerged a tall black gate, closed and imposing like a fortress wall. Dominic swiped a key card. The soft click of an electric lock sounded, and the gate slid open. They drove into a silent compound, the only sounds the murmur of rain against the roof and the low hum of the engine. When the car finally stopped in the underground garage, Dominic said simply, "We're here." Sophia opened the door. A chill draft swept in, making her shudder. He circled around, opened the trunk, and retrieved an umbrella and a blanket. Before she could thank him, he had already opened the umbrella, covering them both as he walked briskly across the wide parking area toward a private elevator. The elevator glowed with soft light, reflecting their faces against the brushed steel walls. A powerful man standing silent, and a young mother clutching her child, fear still shadowing her eyes. When the doors opened, they stepped into a hallway lined with pale wood, unnervingly quiet. Dominic unlocked a door, and the lights inside came on automatically. Warmth spilled out, scent of clean fabric, new wood, and a faint trace of vanilla. The apartment was wide, bright, minimalist yet elegant. Wooden floors, white walls, and soft amber light from glass pendant lamps that glowed like melted candles. Sophia stopped short when she noticed a door slightly ajar. A small room beyond, with a crib, stuffed animals, milk bottles, and a blanket printed with clouds. She turned to him, startled. "There's a nursery!" Dominic only nodded. The previous tenant had a child. She stepped slowly inside, laying Emma gently in the crib. The baby stirred once, then drifted to sleep, her breathing steady and light. Sophia looked around, fingers brushing over the soft blanket, and suddenly her eyes burned. For the first time in months, she felt she could breathe. When she turned back, Dominic was standing by the window, removing his coat. His dark hair was still damp, glinting under the warm light. His movements were calm, yet his eyes were distant, as if he belonged nowhere at all. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because I know what it feels like to be hunted." The words fell between them, heavy like a memory that refused to fade. Sophia didn't ask more. She only watched him, the man whose presence made everything else retreat, and yet who stood there now, silent and kind. Dominic gestured toward the kitchen. "There's food. Clothes in the bedroom. You and Emma can stay here as long as you need." "Why do you have this place?" His lips tightened slightly. "I use it sometimes, for business." The answer was vague enough that she didn't dare press further. Sophia gave a faint, weary smile, not because she trusted him, but because she was too tired not to. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." Dominic shook his head. "You don't." Silence settled again. Only the ticking of a wall clock and the steady tapping of rain on the glass. Streetlights spilled through the window, slicing his face into halves of light and shadow. And in that moment, Sophia realized he wasn't just a stranger. He was something more complex, dangerous, but not cruel, cold, but not unfeeling. "Get some rest," he said, his tone softer now. "You're safe here." When Dominic left, Sophia stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet click of the door closing behind him. The hallway light shimmered briefly on his leather shoes, then vanished as the elevator doors slid shut. She turned back toward the room. The scent of clean wood, warm milk, and her daughter's soft breathing blended into something fragile, like a dream that might vanish if she moved too quickly. She sat on the edge of the bed, covering her face with both hands as silent tears fell. Downstairs, Dominic leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets, watching the rain pour down the glass. In its blurred reflection, he saw the woman's face, lost, exhausted, yet resilient, and something inside him shifted quietly. The London night hadn't ended yet, but in a small corner of it, between two wounded souls, a Mafia man and a young mother, a tiny flame had been lit. Not passion, not pity, just warmth. For the first time, Dominic Russo understood. Some people run from the darkness, and some, unknowingly, carry the light. The rain had fallen all night. Its steady murmur drifted through the window glass like a distant whisper. Rhythmic, low, like the heartbeat of a house holding people who no longer knew how to believe in peace. Sophia sat on the sofa, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a cup of lemon tea warming her hands. Emma had fallen asleep in the next room, the nightlight casting a soft golden glow across her small face. She couldn't sleep. She hadn't slept for many nights, because every time she closed her eyes, the old images returned. The noise, the rough hands, the slamming door, and her own sobs as her baby came into the world through the June rain. The window creaked open. Dominic stepped in, dark shirt clinging to his shoulders, hair still damp. He stopped and looked at her in the pale amber light, his eyes tired but carrying something else inside them. Life. You're still awake. I couldn't sleep, she replied quietly. Too quiet. He sat across from her, the lamp reflecting off his sharp, cold jawline. In the silence, only the rain tapping on the glass and the slow sweep of the clock's hand could be heard. You used to live surrounded by noise, he said, voice low. Silence feels foreign. Sophia looked up at him. There was something in his tone that made her want to speak, to finally let go of what she'd kept buried. She took a breath. He wasn't always a monster, she began. When I met him, he was charming, successful. Everyone said I was lucky, but after we got married, everything changed. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Her voice trembled. It started with small words, sharp ones, cutting deeper than knives. Then came the control. Then came the fear. And one night, the fists. Her hand moved slightly and the lamp revealed a faint scar on her wrist. When I got pregnant, I thought maybe that would change him. It didn't. He said Emma ruined his life. He hit me while I was still bleeding after giving birth. Dominic sat still. His gaze never left her, but in his eyes was a different darkness. Older, deeper. That night, I left the hospital, she went on, her voice unsteady. No shoes, just Emma and me. I walked until my feet bled, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was afraid of being found. She let out a faint laugh, one without joy. Have you ever felt that? When safety feels like something you can't afford? Dominic set his glass of whiskey on the table. Yes, he said, when I was a kid. She lifted her gaze, waiting for him to go on. The light brushed across Dominic's face, carving the shadows deep. His voice dropped lower, slower, as if each word was pulled from the deepest part of memory. My father was a drunk, a violent man. He beat my mother until she couldn't stand. I was 10 the night he killed her. He said she was trying to run away. I hid under the bed, listening. A gust outside made the window pane tremble. Sophia covered her mouth, breath catching. Dominic continued, eyes fixed somewhere far away. They took him away, said justice was served. But what did they know? She was gone, and all I had left was his blood in my veins. Everyone looked at me and saw him. He turned back to her. So I decided to become what they believed I was. Strong, fearless, dangerous enough that no one could ever hurt me again. She looked at him, the light flashing over his weary eyes. But you're not him, she whispered. Sometimes I wonder, he said. Violence runs in the blood like a curse. She shook her head slowly. No, violence comes from fear. You just learned how to survive. Time passed quietly. The rain drummed on, like a sorrowful lullaby. Two people, survivors of different wars, sat facing each other, sharing fragments of memories they'd never told anyone. Dominic watched as tears rolled down her cheeks, falling onto the blanket's edge. It wasn't dramatic, just a quiet acknowledgement. A release. He reached for the handkerchief on the table and offered it to her. "You're safe now," he said softly. "Are we ever?" she asked, her voice so gentle it nearly merged with the rain. Dominic didn't answer. He just looked out the window, at the trails of rain sliding down the glass, protecting the city like scars turned to light. "Maybe not forever," he said at last. "But tonight, yes." She nodded faintly. For the first time, the silence no longer felt heavy, only the warmth of the room, the soft rhythm of rain easing away, and the sense that, for one fragile moment, they were not alone. Outside, London slept under a haze of dim golden lights. Inside, two strangers, a Mafia man and a young mother, shared the same frame. Amid the ghosts of their past, they couldn't erase the wounds, but they had found something once thought lost, a fragile, flickering trust in another human being. Morning settled over London in a blur of mist. Beyond the apartment window, the city wore a pale silver-gray hue, damp as if the night rain had never truly ended. Sophia stirred awake to a soft knock on the door. When she opened it, Dominic Russo stood there, white shirt, sleeves rolled up, holding a heavy paper bag filled with milk, food, a few bottles of medicine, and a small pink box printed with a cartoon rabbit. "You didn't have to," she said, smiling faintly, her voice still rough from sleep. "I was in the area," he replied, calm and casual, as if that were true. She knew he was lying. Dominic Russo didn't just happen to be in the area of a quiet suburban street, but she said nothing, only took the bag from him, her eyes a mix of gratitude and quiet confusion. Emma sat in her crib, wide-eyed, staring at the stranger. When Dominic stepped closer, she began to cry. He hesitated, unsure, then bent down slightly, his voice low and warm. "Hey there, little one." "It's okay. Something strange happened." Emma stopped. She looked at him, reached out her tiny hands and touched the silver ring on his finger, as if she had found something familiar. Sophia watched, a soft smile playing on her lips. "That's impressive. She doesn't usually trust people." "Maybe she can tell I'm not a stranger anymore," he said, still watching the baby. Morning light slipped through the curtains, catching the damp strands of his hair and outlining his tired, angular face. For a moment, he didn't look like the man everyone feared. He looked human, just a man holding a child, awkward and impossibly gentle. He set Emma back down and turned to the kitchen, unpacking the bag. "There's fresh milk." "Diapers?" "I also brought the papers you asked about." Sophia frowned slightly. "I didn't ask for any papers." Dominic paused, a faint smirk crossing his lips. "Then it's just habit, I guess." It was only a fleeting exchange, but Sophia realized something. He didn't need a reason to come. Days passed and Dominic kept returning, sometimes with milk, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with no excuse at all, checking the security system, dropping off some files, or bringing something for Emma. And slowly the safe house stopped being just a shelter for Sophia. It became a place he returned to, even if only to stand silently for a few minutes. At night when she rocked Emma to sleep, Dominic would sit by the window, the city lights glinting softly against his profile. "You don't have to keep checking on us," she told him once. He looked up, his eyes deep and unreadable. "Maybe I do." She held his gaze a little too long before turning away. There was something about Dominic that scared her, and yet made her feel safe. He carried darkness within him, but he knew how to keep it at bay from her fragile world. One night, when Emma had fallen asleep, Sophia brewed 2 cups of tea. She placed one before him. "You're not what I expected," she said. "And what did you expect?" "Someone colder. Someone who disappears once the storm's over." Dominic smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm not good at disappearing." She sat across from him, the quiet rain outside mirroring the golden hush of the room. "Who are you really, Dominic?" He was silent for a moment, his finger tapping lightly against the cup, eyes resting on the crib. "Someone you shouldn't trust." Sophia tilted her head slightly. her eyes never leaving him. But I can? He nodded once. Yes, you can. The words were simple, yet something in the way he said them made her heart tremble. She realized he wasn't just protecting her and Emma. He was fighting his own walls, his own ghosts. And she, a woman who once feared every man she met, felt safest when he was near. When Dominic finally stood to leave, she whispered, "Thank you for coming back." He paused, hand resting on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. "I always come back." The door closed softly. His footsteps faded down the hall. Sophia stood by the window, watching the faint glow of his car lights dissolve into the fog. She didn't know why he kept returning, whether out of duty, pity, or something deeper. All she knew was that in those long, gray days, Dominic Russo, the man with a face carved from shadow, was the only light that never frightened her. Under the fine drizzle of the London night, a man who no longer believed in redemption kept coming back, again and again, as if he'd forgotten how to leave. The night thickened like ink. The rain no longer fell in sheets, but in heavy, deliberate drops, striking the glass with a slow, grinding rhythm. Inside the apartment, the soft light drew the shadows closer together, forming a warm circle around Emma, who slept, her tiny lips pressed shut like a bud at dusk. Then suddenly, a piercing sound ripped through the air, the alarm. A shrill, feral wail blared from the security system, like the growl of a beast jolted awake. The hallway lights flashed red, strobing across the walls like thin streaks of blood. Sophia shot upright, heart clenched in terror. She grabbed Emma, clutching the child to her chest as hurried footsteps echoed outside the door. Fear flared in her, fast and dry, dragging old memories to the surface. Splintered doors, screams, a hand striking hard. She backed toward the crib, frozen, when a man's voice thundered from the hallway, sharp as hail. "Sophia! I know you're in there! Open the door!" That voice, rough, possessive, sent a chill down her spine. Cameron. Every syllable carved into her like an old knife, cutting through the thin shell she'd built over the past months. Moments later came the pounding. Heavy boots, kicks against the door. Not pleading, demanding. The door rattled under the blows. Sophia flinched, fumbling for her phone, her fingers shaking, mind blank as the emergency number slipped away. From the basement came another sound. Not the alarm this time, but a low growl of an engine. The hallway light flickered once more before the apartment door burst open. Dominic appeared, a dark silhouette, soaked through, his suit clinging to his shoulders. Rain traced lines down his hair, his jaw, his collar. He didn't knock, didn't ask. He entered like a storm carrying its own silence. His gaze locked on Cameron, cold as forged steel. No shouting, no raised fists. Just a sliver of light falling across his face, turning every angle hard and sharp. Cameron still clutched the doorknob, face pale, but something else began to surface. Slow, unmistakable fear. Dominic stepped forward, his voice low, steady, carrying the weight of a verdict. "You're done hurting her." Cameron let out a coarse laugh, feigning bravado. "Who do you think you are, huh? You can't—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Dominic's eyes, that blade-like gaze slicing clean through him. Dominic didn't need his fists. He took one more step and said, voice cutting through the air like a knife, "Touch her again, and you'll disappear." No shouting, no elaborate threat, just one short sentence, and in the narrow space between them, the air turned electric. Cameron froze like an animal realizing the trap had closed. His eyes darted, searching for escape, but every path was locked by the weight of those words. Sophia stood by the crib, trembling, not from fear of Dominic, but from the sudden, almost unbelievable sense of safety. For a heartbeat, she grasped something terrifying and miraculous. The man standing before her was the thin line between hell and peace. Cameron stumbled backward, muttering threats that came out hollow, weak. Dominic didn't move, didn't blink. His silence did the talking. Finally, Cameron turned and fled, his footsteps fading down the hall, swallowed by the rain. The door slammed shut behind him, and the storm outside devoured his last echoes. When the noise died, the room fell into stillness. Only the rain and the breathing of three souls. Emma stirred in her crib, then drifted back into sleep. Sophia broke down, not in sobs, but in a soft, quiet cry that melted the hardest walls inside her. Dominic stood in the middle of the room, his clothes still damp, his hand resting lightly on the doorknob, as if assuring himself the boundary still held. Then he turned toward her, his eyes gentler now, voice low and close. "It's over. He won't come back." Sophia looked at him, her gaze a storm of fear, relief, disbelief, and something like trust. She took a step forward and gripped his hand tightly, as though anchoring herself after a lifetime of drifting. In that fragile silence, she understood. Safety wasn't permanent. It was a line drawn by someone strong enough to hold it. Dominic didn't use violence to prove power. He set a boundary, and the world simply obeyed. Holding Emma in her arms, Sophia exhaled, a long, trembling breath, as if releasing years of fear. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside the small apartment, the door stood firm, and a man, quiet and watchful, kept the darkness from coming in. After that night of rain and whispered threats behind the door, the apartment sank back into silence. But from that moment on, nothing was the same. Sophia looked at Dominic differently now, not with fear, but with something softer, mixed with curiosity, gratitude, and a feeling she didn't dare name. When he stepped through the doorway, leaving faint trails of rainwater on the floor, her heartbeat never quite steadied. As for Dominic, something inside him had shifted too. Since that night, he spoke less. He still came often, sometimes under the excuse of checking the security system, sometimes simply to see Emma laugh. But something in him had begun to move, slow and hidden, like an underground current beneath frozen earth. One evening, when London lay drowned in fog, Dominic arrived later than usual. He carried a small bottle of whiskey and 2 glass tumblers. Sophia was folding laundry in the living room, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders. "I didn't know you drank," she said, her voice light as mist. "I don't," he replied, setting the bottle down. "But tonight feels heavier than usual." He poured the amber liquid into the glasses, the light catching it like rippling memory. They sat across from each other in silence for several minutes. The only sounds were the ticking clock and their breaths touching in the small space between them. Sophia broke the silence first. "You never told me who you really are, Dominic." He lifted his gaze, the dim gold light glinting off his dark brown eyes. "You don't want to know." "Maybe I do." A brief pause, then Dominic set his glass down, tracing the rim with one finger. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I'm not a good man, Sophia." "What does that mean?" "It means people call me something that doesn't belong in the same sentence as good." He stopped, his eyes drifting toward the window, where the city lights slid down the glass in lines of rain. "They call me the Dawn." Sophia didn't speak. The word fell into the air like a stone into still water, rippling quietly outward. She could hear her own heartbeat, quick but not afraid. "Then why did you stop that night?" she asked. The question cut straight through him. Dominic looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes, followed by something heavier, almost like shame. He didn't answer at once. When he finally did, his voice was rough, unsteady. "Because you reminded me of my mother." Sophia blinked, breath catching in her throat. "And I thought," he continued softly, "maybe this time I could save someone." The words shattered the distance between them. No more explanations were needed. She understood. She understood that the man before her didn't only carry darkness. He carried a wound so deep it had become part of who he was. He let out a small, bitter laugh. "When I saw you run into my car, holding your baby like she was the last breath you had left, I saw my mother. The same terror, the same fight to protect something pure in a world that knows no mercy." Sophia rose slowly and walked toward the window. London's light shimmered on the droplets clinging to the glass. She didn't turn around when she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then maybe you did save someone." Dominic watched her silhouette, fragile, still, yet unbreakably strong. He stepped forward, stopping just half a step behind her. They stood side by side, framed by the window, the glow from the streetlights painting their faces, half in light, half in shadow, the fragile line between guilt and redemption. You shouldn't be near me, he said quietly. Everything I touch breaks. Maybe not this time, she answered, turning her head slightly until her eyes met his. 1 second. 2. The world seemed to hold its breath. Between them, nothing moved, no grand gesture, no sudden closeness. Only breath, only eyes, only hearts trying to remember how to beat. But for Dominic, it felt like the first earthquake in a heart that had long been frozen. He turned away, hiding the tremor in his hands. Sophia, I've done things you can't imagine. I'm not asking for the man you were, she said softly. I'm just grateful for the man who stopped that night. Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, like an old song returning. Dominic looked through the glass where the lights of London fractured across the falling water and realized that for the first time in years, he was trembling. Not from fear, not from guilt, from something else. Something he thought he'd lost long ago, hope. And in the breath of that quiet night, amid the reflection of street lights on Rain Street glass, Dominic Russo, the man once called the Don, felt his heart lighten, as if the rain itself were washing away a piece of the darkness he had carried all his life. Spring came to London with timid sunlight filtering through the fog. Shy but warm. After weeks of living in tension, Sophia finally felt herself breathing again. Slowly, deliberately, one steady rhythm at a time. It all began with the small things Dominic did. No noise, no display. Just invisible fingerprints, quietly rearranging the pieces of her life. That morning, Sophia found a thick envelope on the table. Inside were Emma's new birth certificate, legal identification papers, and a certified custody document signed and sealed by the court. She froze. Tears welled in her eyes as she read her name. Sophia Langford, neatly written, no longer bound to Cameron's surname. No one could take her child away again. How did you do this? She asked when Dominic walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. I know people, he said simply, setting 1 cup down. People or lawyers? Both, he smiled. Good ones. Sophia gave a small laugh, still uncertain. Every time he appeared, her world seemed to settle, as if he could see the fractures inside her and quietly fit them back together. A few days later, Dominic took her to a new office space in Canary Wharf, the 14th floor of a glass building overlooking the Thames. A friend owed me a favor, he said. He runs the logistics division of my company. There's an opening for an operations assistant. Flexible hours. You can bring Emma sometimes. Sophia stood by the window, watching small boats drift under the bridge, her hair caught by the wind. You own this? A part of it, he replied, glancing at her. The legal part. The line made her laugh. So, there is a legal part of Dominic Russo? I'm working on expanding it, he said, half serious, half amused. Midday light streamed through the glass, reflecting across his face. Firm features, eyes a little tired, but strangely peaceful. For the first time, she saw him truly smile. Not the crooked smirk, not the weary grin of a man who'd seen too much sin, but something real, alive. In the days that followed, life found a new rhythm. Sophia worked a few days a week, learning to handle shipments, surrounded by ordinary voices, people who didn't know, didn't judge. By afternoon, when she came home, Dominic was sometimes already there, sitting in the kitchen with Emma. He never came empty-handed, sometimes tulips, sometimes pastries, sometimes just a steaming pot of coffee. Emma always laughed when she saw him, running toward him on unsteady legs. One evening, Sophia stopped at the doorway, unable to move. Dominic was sitting on the floor, sleeves rolled up, Emma in his lap, giggling as he pretended to read the wrong words from her picture book. The cat says, woof. Emma burst into laughter, her little body shaking. He raised an eyebrow, mock serious. No? Then what does the cat say? Meow. That's right. Smart girl. Sophia leaned against the doorframe, her chest tightening. The scene was so warm, so fragile, she was afraid even breathing might break it. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Dominic remained in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee in his hands. Sophia refilled it for him. You don't have to keep doing all this, she said softly. You've done enough. Maybe I like doing it, he replied, voice low. Keeps me clean. She tilted her head, smiling faintly. Clean? You know what I mean? He didn't look at her, but his gaze lingered on Emma's small hand peeking out from under the blanket. His lips curved slightly. This feels like home, he said, almost under his breath. Sophia said nothing. The word home hung in the air. Too precious, too far away. She didn't dare break the spell. He looked up, the light catching his eyes. I've spent years building walls, Sophia. But every time I come here, he gave a quiet laugh, shaking his head. The walls don't hold. She set her cup down and stood beside him. Maybe it's time you stop building them. Neither spoke after that. Only the ticking clock and the faint scent of coffee lingered in the air. Outside, London glowed against the damp night. Boats drifted slowly along the river, city lights shimmering on the surface like scattered stars. In the small kitchen, two souls, one who had spent her life running, the other who had made others run, sat side by side, silent, as if the world had finally gone still. And in that quiet moment, Dominic Russo understood. Perhaps he no longer needed to choose between light and darkness, because here, in the laughter of a child and the warmth of a woman, he had found the space in between, where both could finally exist. The small apartment glowed under the amber light. The air carried a delicate mix of coffee, rain, and the faint warmth of Emma's milk, a scent that somehow belonged only to quiet evenings like this. Sophia sat on the sofa, turning a teacup slowly between her hands, eyes following Dominic as he fastened the window latch. He had just come back from a meeting, dark suit, top button undone, hair damp with mist. His frame was steady but weary, like a man who carried the world in silence. You're here late, she said softly. Couldn't sleep, he replied. Besides, your coffee's better than mine. She smiled faintly and poured him another cup. For a while, neither spoke. Only the clock ticked and rain tapped a slow rhythm against the glass. Dominic's gaze swept the apartment, the old curtains, the soft lamplight touching small frame photos of mother and child. He had never imagined a place so simple could feel so peaceful. Sophia rested her chin on her hand, watching him. Why are you still helping us? The question made him pause. A long moment passed before he spoke, eyes lowering to the grain of the wooden table. Because I can't stop. The answer was brief, but it lingered in the air like a confession. Sophia looked up. There was something new in his eyes. Not guilt, but the quiet exhaustion of a man who had lived too long in darkness and didn't know what to do with the light. You don't have to, she said gently. You've done enough. Maybe not, he murmured. Maybe helping you is the only thing that keeps me human. Her heartbeat slowed. In that moment, she realized he wasn't as unshakable as the world believed. He was just a lost man, trying to find his way back. Dominic set his coffee down, hands tightening. Sophia, I've spent my whole life fixing things with fear. Every deal, every decision, built on control. But you, he gave a low, helpless laugh. You walked into my life with nothing but a baby in your arms and still somehow made me lose it. Sophia met his gaze. Her eyes glimmered beneath the lamp, like deep water reflecting a rainy sky. She said nothing, only reached out, her fingertips brushing his cheek. His skin was cool, his jaw tense, and yet when she touched him, he froze, as though the world had stilled. Dominic, she whispered, you don't have to save everyone. Just let someone save you. And in that instant, every sound fell away. The rain outside seemed to disappear, leaving only their breathing in the quiet room. Dominic looked at her, the softness in her eyes, the tremor in her lips, the fear of her own courage. He leaned in. No rush, no heat, just a touch. A kiss light as breath, yet enough to make the world fall away. She tasted rain and coffee and a trace of sorrow in his breath. His hand found the back of her neck, not gripping, only holding, as if afraid she might vanish if he let go. And she, instead of pulling back, tilted toward him, letting her heart tremble for the first time in years. The kiss lingered in silence. No music, no flickering lights. Only two souls long, frozen, melting slowly back into life. When they finally parted, Neither spoke. Sophia rested her forehead against his shoulder. Dominic closed his eyes, drawing a slow, unsteady breath. "You shouldn't have done that," he murmured, though his voice held no anger. "I know," she said softly, "but it felt like I had to." He gave a low, rough laugh, wind-torn and aching. "You just broke something in me." "Then maybe it needed breaking," she replied, lifting her gaze to his. The light caught her eyes, clear, steady, unafraid. And for the first time, Dominic felt his heart, something he'd believed long dead, beat again, faintly, but real. She stepped back half a pace, but he reached for her hand, fingers threading gently through hers. "Sophia," he said, barely above a breath, "you don't know how dangerous it is to care about me." "Then teach me," she answered, "because I already do." Outside, the rain had stopped. Drops clung to the window, catching the city lights like falling stars. Dominic glanced out, then back at her. Something inside him collapsed. The walls he'd built his whole life, the armor of silence and control, crumbling without a sound. And in that small room, beneath the warm light and the slow ticking of time, two people who no longer believed in love found it not in promises, not in passion, but in a kiss so gentle it set them free. A kiss, the kiss that broke the curse. The message arrived on a May morning, just after the rain had stopped. "We'd like to offer you the position." Only one line. Simple, ordinary. Yet to Sophia, it rang like the first bell of a new life. The job in Manchester. Stable position, good salary, housing included. A chance to truly begin again. She sat by the window, fingers gripping her phone, eyes drifting toward the thinning mist outside. In the corner of the room, Emma was playing with the stuffed bear Dominic had given her, laughing each time it fell over. Sophia watched her daughter and exhaled softly. She knew she should be happy, but the thought of leaving London, this apartment, him, made something inside her tighten. That afternoon, Dominic came by. Same look as always. Open collar shirt, hands in pockets, eyes impossible to read. He listened while she told him about the offer, the promises of the new job, not interrupting, not asking when she would leave. He just nodded, gaze dropping to the floor. "That's good," he said finally. "You deserve a fresh start." "You mean away from you," she replied, half joking, half afraid. He didn't deny it. "People like me don't get to keep the good things, Sophia. We just, make sure they're safe before they go." She looked at him for a long time. Something in her chest ached, seeing the man who once terrified half a city now speak with a voice rough, weary and kind. "So that's it?" she asked quietly. "You'll just let me go?" "I should," he said, managing a faint smile. "Doesn't mean I want to." Silence fell between them. Outside, the London sunset spilled across the table, golden and sad, like a glass of wine left half full. Night. The apartment was still, broken only by the ticking clock and the soft tap of rain against the glass. Sophia sat folding clothes, tucking small things into the suitcase. Emma was asleep, breathing evenly, her tiny hand clutching the worn bear. A knock came. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Dominic stood in the doorway. No jacket, no trace of the man people once called Don. Just a rain-soaked man, hands empty, eyes lost. "I thought you'd already left," he said quietly. "Tomorrow," she answered. "I was just packing." He glanced around. The room looked emptier, colder. On the chair sat an open suitcase and a small photo of Emma, turned face down. He swallowed hard, hiding the sting in his chest. "You'll be happy there," he said. "Maybe," she whispered, "but it's not home." He looked up. Their eyes met. Neither smiled nor cried. The silence between them said everything. "Everything I care about is here," she said softly but with certainty. "Emma lights up when she sees you. And I love you, Dominic Russo." The words fell like raindrops hitting water, small but rippling deep. Dominic closed his eyes. 1,000 reasons to step back rushed through him. His past, his guilt, the danger that followed him. But one heartbeat later, he moved forward and pulled her into his arms. "You shouldn't," he murmured, voice breaking. "I don't deserve that." Maybe love isn't about deserving, she whispered, resting her head against his chest. Maybe it's about being brave enough to choose it. He held her tighter, his hand pressed to her back, as if to carve the moment into memory. Then we'll figure it out, he said quietly. Together. She looked up, her eyes bright beneath the soft gold light. Together? For as long as you'll have me. He bent down and kissed her forehead. A kiss without fear, without hesitation. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, but inside, everything seemed to realign. The fragments, the wounds, the pieces they thought could never fit again. The next morning, the first sunlight slipped through the curtains, falling on two figures sitting side by side in the kitchen. Steam curled from their coffee cups. Emma crawled across the floor, giggling. Sophia reached under the table and brushed her fingers against Dominic's hand. He looked up and smiled. A quiet, genuine smile, calm as dawn. No one mentioned Manchester again. No one spoke of what they should do or where they should go. Because some places aren't defined by maps. They're found by the heart. And that night, in a small London apartment, Dominic Russo, the man who had lived his whole life on the edge between light and dark, finally chose the light. Because one woman had been brave enough to choose him first. 2 years later, spring had settled across Surrey. The morning sunlight spilled softly over the red-tiled roof of the small house at the end of the gravel lane. On the porch, the breeze stirred the lavender blooms, carrying their scent into the kitchen, where Dominic Russo was losing a battle with a frying pan. Smoke rose in thin ribbons, the faint smell of burnt toast mingling with the sound of a child's laughter. "Daddy! Smoke!" Emma's voice rang from the living room, bright and musical, like a bell. The 3-year-old, with brown curls and a cat print pajama set, came running, dragging a worn-out teddy bear behind her. Dominic laughed and switched off the stove. "It's not smoke, baby. It's extra flavor." Emma tilted her head, wide-eyed and skeptical. "Mummy says smoke is bad." "Your mummy," he said, arching an eyebrow, "is right about most things." A voice floated down from the stairs. "Most things?" Sophia appeared, moving carefully, one hand resting on her round belly. 7 months along, she was wearing Dominic's white shirt over her nightdress, her hair loosely tied, her face glowing even through the traces of sleep. He crossed the room to meet her, steadying her down the last step. "Morning, Mrs. Russo. You burnt breakfast again, didn't you?" "Define burnt," he teased, the corner of his mouth lifting. She laughed, shaking her head, then wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You know," she murmured, 2 years ago, you didn't even know how to boil water." 2 years ago, he said softly, I didn't have someone worth boiling it for." The words silenced her. For a moment, the world was still. The rustle of wind through the window, the scent of coffee drifting in the air, sunlight falling over their shoulders like a golden dream. Out in the garden, the roses Sophia had planted were in bloom. Through the glass, Dominic watched as Emma crouched down with a tiny watering can, carefully pouring water over the petals. He never thought there would be mornings like this. No phone calls, no meetings, no guns, no men watching from the shadows. Just the sound of water spilling from a child's hands and laughter echoing in the air. By noon, Sophia was resting, and Dominic was tidying Emma's toys. On the table lay a few crayon drawings, a small house, a man with dark hair, a woman with golden hair, and a little girl holding a balloon. At the top, in crooked letters, it read, "My family." He brushed his fingers over the paper, and his eyes softened. 2 years ago, the word family had meant nothing to him, only loyalty born of fear, cold dinners, and empty rooms. Now a child's messy handwriting could make his chest ache with fullness. "You're staring at her masterpiece again," Sophia teased, stepping out with a cup of tea. "I think she captured my good side," he said. "She gave you gray hair," she laughed. "That's because her father's aging fast, raising her." He moved closer, his hand finding her belly. "And this one's going to finish the job." She smiled, guiding his hand gently so he could feel the tiny heartbeat within. "You're not scared?" she asked softly. "Of what?" "Of losing control again. Of turning back into who you were." Dominic grew quiet, his gaze drifting toward the light beyond the window. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady. I used to think power was about fear. Now I know it's about what you choose to protect. Sophia reached up, cupping his face, her smile tender. And what are you protecting now, Mr. Russo? He looked at her, his eyes softening like a lake after the storm. This. Later, in the golden hush of afternoon, sunlight poured over the backyard. Dominic sat on the wooden bench while Emma climbed onto his shoulders, tugging at his hair like reins. Faster, Daddy! You're my horse! Your horse's back is getting old. No, she squealed, bursting into laughter. From the window, Sophia watched them, shaking her head with a smile. In that small frame, all fear and darkness seemed to fade away. Dominic Russo, the man who once made London tremble, was now sitting in the grass, letting his daughter smear paint on his shirt. He once spread fear. Now he spread peace. When evening came, the three of them sat on the porch. The setting sun brushed the lavender field in soft orange, the breeze carrying the scent of baking bread from the oven. Emma rested her head on Sophia's shoulder, yawning. Dominic looked at them and whispered, "You gave me a second chance, Sophia." She didn't look at him, her gaze following the sinking sun. "No," she said gently. "You gave it to yourself. You just needed someone to believe you could." He took her hand and squeezed it. It was smaller than his, yet it was the only thing strong enough to pull him out of the dark. The last light of the sunset touched her hair. Dominic kissed her forehead, then looked toward the little house where Emma's sleepy murmur filled the air. "Home," he whispered. "It finally feels real." And in that quiet Surrey dusk, Dominic Russo, the man who had once lived by darkness, finally understood. Some people don't need power to rule the world. They just need enough love to keep their own light alive. Late afternoon, the last light of the day slanted through the window, spreading gold across the wooden floor and the white walls of the small house in Surrey. Outside, lavender swayed gently in the breeze, its scent drifting through the open window, touching the still air like a silent piece of music. Sophia stood by the window, one hand resting on her round belly. The baby inside her kicked softly, a gentle knock from life itself. She smiled. Sunlight shimmered on her fingers, as if the sun itself wanted to linger just a little longer to witness this peace. From the garden came the sound of bright, clear laughter. Emma ran across the grass, holding a tiny kitten in her arms, her little feet brushing the green blades, her dress fluttering behind her. "Daddy, look, she's chasing butterflies." From the porch, Dominic Russo looked up from his newspaper, a smile tugging at his lips. He still carried that presence. Broad shoulders, deep eyes, the low voice that once made London tremble. But now every sharp edge was softened by light, by the quiet breath of peace. He walked over and stood behind Sophia, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. "You okay?" "Better than ever," she whispered. Together they watched as Emma tumbled onto the grass, laughing so hard that she forgot to get up. That laughter, innocent and pure, washed away every sound of the past. The rain, the threats, the slamming doors. Sophia spoke softly, her voice gentle as the wind. "Thank you. For that night. For stopping the car." Dominic leaned in, his breath warm against her ear, tasting of sunlight. "You didn't just hide in my car, Sophia." "Hmm?" He smiled faintly, whispering, "You found my heart there." The words made her turn toward him. Their eyes met. Between them there was no darkness left, no distance, only the quiet stillness of two souls once broken, now whole again. A breeze drifted through, moving the curtains. Light poured in, casting their shadows on the wall, his tall and solid, hers small and curved, with the soft outline of her belly between them. A family, not perfect, not easy, but real. Dominic's gaze followed the scene outside. Emma stretched her arms toward the butterflies, flitting over the lavender, sunlight breaking on her soft brown hair. Her laughter floated back into the house, filling the air with something that felt like redemption. "Daddy, come play," she called. He waved back, voice warm and steady. "I'm coming, sweetheart." Before stepping outside, he paused beside Sophia. She looked up. "What?" "Just making sure this is real," he said, eyes tracing the room. The light, her belly. I've spent half my life waiting for the storm. I never thought I'd see the sun. Her fingers closed gently around his. The storm's still out there, she said, smiling softly. But now we know how to dance in the rain. He laughed, a full, unguarded laugh, free of everything that once weighed him down. Evening deepened. Dominic lifted Emma high into the air, her laughter ringing out against the golden sky. She reached for the last rays of sunlight, catching them in her small hands. Sophia stood by the doorway, one hand on her belly, watching father and daughter framed by the glow of dusk. The scene was simple, warm, ordinary. Yet it was something she had once believed she would never have. The breeze carried the scent of earth, sunlight, and the faint memory of rain. In that moment, Dominic Russo, the man who had once spread fear through the streets of London, felt his heart go still, calm as the surface of a lake. He understood then. Peace isn't found by running from the darkness, but by having the courage to love within it. The sunset drenched the garden in gold. Emma laughed as butterflies fluttered around her. The lavender swayed, the wind hummed, and Dominic stood there, holding his daughter, eyes lifted toward the woman smiling at him from the doorway. The woman who once made him stop his car, and then made him stop running from life itself.